Hi folks, hope you're well and welcome to episode 4 of View from the Touchline. And for this week, I'm delighted to welcome Gary Hunt to the podcast. Gary, thank you very much for giving up your time to speak to me this evening. Gary is a UEFA A licensed coach and he also holds the UEFA Elite Youth A licence. Last season, Gary was under-19s head coach at Waterford Football Club, who play in the League of Ireland Premier Division. During his time with the club, he was also head of youth development. Gary's currently head coach at Tramore AFC, which is a club in Waterford, and I'll be asking him more about his experiences in leading at that club later on. He's also former manager at Wexford Youth Women's Football Club, where he enjoyed a successful time winning back-to-back league championships. And Gary is also an ambassador for the Coach's Voice Academy, which is something I'm really keen to discuss with you later, Gary. But my first question for you tonight is, what does coaching and the role of a coach mean to you?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Colin. Great to have a little chat with you there. Role of coaching, to me, is coaching. I kind of associate with teaching, I suppose. I work a little bit in education as well. So for me, coaching is kind of getting a set of skills across to a group of players. As a role of a coach, I suppose it's really kind of understanding the people that are in front of you. So we all coach at different levels, and I've coached at a lot of different levels. And it's just understanding who you've got in front of you, the language you use to them, the quality or the quantity of information you give them. And it's just understanding their needs and being able to give them that, as I said, that those skills that kind of teaching different things. And the big thing about it really is life skills, really. We're keen on that, and I'm big on that. That yes, we might be coaching them on the football pitch, but ultimately we're trying to, prepare them for maybe life outside football, or preparing them for stepping from secondary school into college, or stepping into a job where they need to speak up for themselves and things like that. So it's trying to give them those skills as well as much as making them better footballers and enjoying football, because what I'm going to be really interested to see once we come out of this lockdown period is the dropout rates of sport, and maybe the retention rate, which is going to be quite interesting. And our role as coaches, I suppose, are going to be to make sure people stay involved because they enjoy it. So that's a big thing for me, is teaching them skills on the pitch and away from the pitch.
Brilliant. When you sent me through your CV earlier this week, and when I look at the experiences you've had, it's really clear to me that you've got a real passion for developing young players. I just wonder, where did that passion come from? Were there any early influences on you, or has that just always been something you've been passionate about?
Yeah, I suppose on my local club, as you mentioned before, Tramore AFC. That's where I'm from, Tramore, and our local club means a lot to us, and we've had a lot of role models in the club that, growing up, you work with young players, and it's all about developing players to push them on maybe to higher levels. But we've got a pretty strong influence there. I started coaching as probably not the backwards role of it, but I started as probably an 18, 19-year-old coaching under 16s, 17s and 18s.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to keep some of my friends who were a couple of years younger than me wanted to keep playing, and I felt I wouldn't mind kind of coaching. And then I went backwards and started working with young people, and I felt that it's something I'm good at, and how I deliver messages to young people and have them enjoying the game. So I suppose it's stuck with me a lot. I found that kind of that working with young people, the rewards, as I said, I work in education, so I'm currently working in UReach, which is a second chance education system. So when you see the rewards you get from it, it's quite satisfactory that you're giving something back. You're giving your time up, more often than not in a voluntary setting, and you're seeing people maybe flourish to step into college, or step onto, went for trials on a team and made a representative team. Those things, are good, but also keeping players involved in the games. I said that's a big thing. So developing them for many reasons, and as I said, Tramore FC has played a massive part in my development for wanting to work with young players.
And you mentioned there how you started off working with maybe the older, what we would call academy age groups, 16, 17, 18s, and you went back to working with younger kids. How did you have to adapt when you ended up working with the younger kids? Because a lot of the time, people say you don't really learn how to coach until you coach the youngest kids. What did you have to learn? What did you have to change?
Yeah, it was a funny one. I was doing a couple of youth teams, with my first under-18 teams, and then the club approached me and asked me, would I take, a group of under-9s and work with them for a couple of years, and I stuck with them for a few years actually, to be fair. But uh, a lot of it was learning on the job. I didn't see myself working with the smallies as such, but then I got into it, and you kind of see that long term, right? What we doing? We're going back to basics. You're teaching them. You're not talking. You're not using language that they're going to be looking back at you. Maybe we did sometimes, maybe, and we've all made mistakes, but it's about, the long-term process then, and how will they be? And in fact, I'm happy and I'm delighted to see that a lot of that group, that when I did start back with them in under nines, a lot of them are playing in the main Tramore Premier team now, or some of them are playing still in League of Ireland first teams. So I'm delighted to see that they're still interested in the game. So that
Yeah.
for me is a big thing, that they're still playing and they've not dropped off a lot. So that's a lot of satisfaction I take. But as I said, it's a big change in working with 18-year-olds to go back to 10, 11, 12-year-olds.
Yeah. And the last couple of guests I've had on the podcast, as well as myself, we've had experiences of working in university football where you're coaching players very similar age to yourself. And also, you had that experience as well. How did you find that experience, and how did you find it it influenced your communication and your the way you interacted with your players?
Yeah, I suppose that's going back a while now. That's probably the start of my coaching. I was still learning. I probably, in those days, I didn't envisage that I'd probably go on and do a B license, an A license, and an Elite Youth A as well. So I suppose it was more, I don't know if you'd use the term, a recreational coach, enjoying it and probably seeing things on the internet or seeing things in a book and wanting to transfer that over. And now I'm an advocate of, if you look at things and people want to put on Guardiola sessions or stuff, and you're saying, well, you got to tailor this. Probably in my days, I didn't. I was that young, enthusiastic coach that wanted to put on the best, fanciest sessions going. But as I've developed, I suppose it's changed a lot, and I've learned that, and that's a big learning curve for me, that what you see on the television now or on Twitter and all of those, that they're sometimes not the best sessions to put on for some of the kids you're working with. And as you said, that coach's voice ambassador role, what I've seen so far, is really good in terms of it's shown content, specific content to young people working with youth players, instead of looking at sessions for Barcelona, Manchester United, Manchester City first team sessions,
Yeah, I think the stuff around the coach's voice is really interesting, and we'll definitely touch on that more later. But just for now, I want to talk about your experiences at Waterford. So before you became under-19s head coach, you're obviously head of youth development, and I just wondered what was your main philosophy in terms of approaching that role, in terms of you're obviously overseeing the development of all the age groups across the academy, overseeing the development of coaches within that. How did you try and approach that role?
Yeah, it was an interesting one. It actually worked out. I actually ended up doing a dual role of 19s head coach and overseeing the academy. And the same year, I actually went on to the Elite Youth A license. So it was a busy year for me. But you know what? When I was asked about it, I thought, you know what? Where do I want to go in coaching? And I thought, let's go for this and see how we go. A lot of it was learning on the job for me. I'm still relatively young in terms of my coaching career and in terms of a job as in leading an academy. But I felt, you know what? I felt that I had a lot of the respect of most of the coaches in the club. So I went for it, and I have to say, a lot of those coaches worked with me. What we wanted to do. It was a collective thing. We wanted a club that wanted to be progressive. We wanted a club that wanted to give players an opportunity to come through an academy with a view of becoming a first team player. We didn't want a club that had an academy and had a first team. We wanted joined up thinking, and which was what was great was, I speak back again, Tramore. When I was in the club, I was the 19s manager and head of academy, originally from Tramore. The first team manager was Alan Reynolds, who was from Tramore as well, along with Fran Rocket, who was also from Tramore. So there was a lot of joined up thinking there, because we knew each other and we knew a lot about each other, and we knew that what we were trying to do was good. So there was a lot of collective work done by the first team and the academy to bring all that together. and that was fantastic. And we made a lot of progress. For me, the academy is not about winning things, but we do put a spin on the under 19s and preparing them for first team football. So when I was in that job, for me, it was about recruiting, firstly, a staff around me that supplemented the skills I have and what the skills I don't have. So I done that first and foremost. I recruited really well, got some good coaches in, and we approached the 19s in a different sense of how we wanted them to go about things. So it was first team football. We'll treat it like that. We'll ask how we gonna play. Do we want to win? Where it wasn't as important in the younger ages, and the club and the academy bought into that, and we're really lucky in the sense that it worked for us in the 19s, that we worked on development, but we also ended up being successful in winning the National League, and a lot of those players are still in the first team, and a lot of those players have gone on to scholarships and things like that. So it's been successful in that sense, and the club will continue to grow. I'm unfortunately not going to be part of the academy next season, but I know that there's some good people still involved that will push those players. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they progress now over the next 12 months.
Great. I think it's really interesting what you said about the under 19s role, about how you try to combine that development of trying to push players into the first team and prepare them for senior football, and also couple that with trying to win and be successful. Just want to dig a little bit deeper into that and ask, how was that approach reflected in your philosophy as a coach with that group, and maybe things like your session design and the way you communicated with players?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the year. I thought it was fantastic. I felt the players bought into what we were trying to do, and I think that was the main one. We, as a coaching staff, I think we were a likable coaching staff. There was never a session or a day the players were coming in thinking, oh, they're going to run us, or they're going to give us down the banks today. It was all progressive. It was all open. It was empowering the players to have the opportunity to give back to making this team. And as I say team, I mean coaches, players, everybody, making us better. We spoke to the players and we put it to them, and we said, right, how do you want to approach the season? And they bought into that, and they said along the similar lines. So for us at 19s, it was about, right, if you're in the team and you're performing, you stay in the team, and if that means you stay in for 6, 7, 8 games and someone's waiting in lieu for a jersey, so be it. We'll reward you. In that sense, we had Colin Whelan, who was playing with UCD now in the first division, and he's had a fantastic year. First year he got 30, 40 goals that season for us, so it was a player who was never going to lose the jersey. But in terms of session design and things, I suppose, again, we done a lot of work early in the season. We faced a lot of setbacks, so we had to do a lot of work with the players in terms of how we deal with those setbacks. We lost a cup place because an official made a mistake with an extra substitution, an extra time. So how we reacted to that, we lost the game because the pitch wasn't lined. How we dealt with that, and we had a lot of setbacks along the way. So a lot of our sessions, we would have incorporated that in terms of how do the players deal with something that they're not expecting, and that built up. And come the second half of the season, a lot of it was maintenance with the players. Put on a session that they were enjoying. We'd give them feedback then as to guards who they're playing the weekend, what we feel we could do to exploit that, and tailor that session towards the game the weekend. And it was a constant cycle. Then it was prepare, it was maintain, and the players, as I said, the players had the quality then that they could show when they went out on the pitch that they were ready to step up to the plate.
Yeah. Well, clearly, when a player gets to the under 19s level, especially at that high level in the under 19s Electricity League, they're going to be good players, but taking that next step to be in the first team obviously requires them to maybe add or develop their mental side of the game. I just wonder, for you as a coach, is there anything you try and do? I know you mentioned within session design and trying to help your players deal with setbacks. Is there things you try to help your players with in terms of developing mental characteristics like resilience or perseverance, things like that?
Yeah, I suppose we work at 19s, and the big debate, I suppose, in the League of Ireland at the moment is, a lot of these players come to 19s and there's nothing for them after 19s. So the lucky few will make first team football somewhere, but it's not going to be 100% retention rate in the League of Ireland, unfortunately. So we have to we want to push them all. We want to keep them all in the game. But obviously we know that they're not all going to make it. So for us, it's important to, as you said, to work with those players to see, right, if you don't make it next year, right, what's plan B, what's plan C, so a lot of work I would have done with the players. I had a really good coaching staff that I could allow. Okay, we train, say, a Tuesday night. I could say, right, lads, we need A, B, and C hit on tonight, and then I can step back and I can start to look at the players and see, is there anything going on? I can speak individually to the players, and as I said, because we were a likable staff, the players would be quite open with us, and they'd be honest and give us some good feedback that we could, if we needed to rearrange things, we would. So that helped. That helped in the fact that I didn't have to be as hands-on. Yes, I missed, not running the session all the time, but I believe that helped that team and those players develop different skills. That we had someone sitting back watching and overseeing the session, that eventually I could pull someone aside at the end and say, okay, you weren't yourself today, is everything okay? And it might be just a bad session, but sometimes someone might say, look, I've a bit going on, I have this, I have that, and we could work together on that. And, if it meant, okay, do you know what, take tomorrow night off or whatever, so be it. But as I said, we got the best out of our players, so I think it worked in the approach we gave them. I'm not saying that'll work for every group of players. Like if we go back to last season, I know we had the challenge of COVID as well. We had a different group of players. We weren't as talented as a group, but we had players that wanted to work harder. And those players were very, very unlucky not to make a national final again. We were just held 0-0 with Pats on the last day, and Pats went in and got to the final and won it. And credit to them for that, But it really comes down to the group of players. And as I spoke at the start of the chat here, that what coaching is, it's understanding the players you have in front of you and what makes them tick. And that's a big thing for a coach at an elite level, especially.
Great. I just want to touch a bit now on your experience with Wexford Youth Women. So obviously you were there, firstly in an assistant role, I believe, and then you became head coach. And obviously during your time there, you won 2 National League titles, which is fantastic. How did you find that experience, and was that your first experience of working in the women's game?
Yeah, I went to. In 2013, I went to the States for. I was offered a couple of positions out there, and it was coaching some sides over there. And I kind of questioned, was I going to go? And I went, and I said, if I didn't go, I'd ask myself, down the line, what if you had it went? So I went, and when I came back, I made a decision to myself that I wanted to work at the highest level. And whatever way it came about, I ended up as the assistant manager with Wexford Youth Women under Will Doyle. A fantastic learning experience. Will, Laura, myself, loads of others, a lot of the players. I couldn't speak any more highly of the players. Probably the most determined set of players I've seen in a long time, and probably will see for a while. It was a really enjoyable experience, but it was probably the biggest learning experience for myself as well. To go from an assistant role to the manager's job, I picked up so much learning experience for myself and about myself in that time. And that's what stood to me. That's what's probably developed me a lot as a coach over the last few years, and probably seemed right. A lot of what maybe I would have done in Wexford was good, but a lot of it wasn't as good. And I learned that, okay, if I was to do that again, what would I do differently? And that was a big thing for me. But as I said, it was a fantastic experience to work in the women's game. There's some players in that squad, and they're still playing. It's a fantastic club that are really pushing, and I follow them now, and you're following the results and stuff. But as I said, an excellent experience, and it's an evolving game, and it's really good to see today. There's been a mention of SSE Electricity coming on board to sponsor the league now again, so it'll run in line with the men's game, which is going to be a big move for the women's game in Ireland.
Yeah, and it sounds like you had a really valuable experience there. And as part of your time there, you took part in the qualification stages for the UEFA Women's Champions League. What were the challenges of that experience, and what lessons did you learn from it?
Yeah, it was that was fantastic. it was the first year we were there. We won the league. It was the first time Wexford Youths had won the league, so that was just fantastic in itself. To grow a belief within those players to go out into that pitch and believe they're going to win every week was fantastic. That in turn obviously qualified us for the Champions League, and you know straight away there's a bit of a buzz about that because you're coaching in the Champions League and the whole what it brings with it. So that was great. First year we ended up going to Poland, a club called Medic Conan was the name of the club. They were hosting us. So themselves, Gintry Universities of Lithuania, and we had Cardiff Met from Wales. So it was a 4-group team, ran off over the week. Big challenge for us was we were third seed, so the 2 seeds above us were probably full time with massive budgets. I remember talking someone, I think, met one of the coaches of the Lithuanian team, and they had a budget for the year of €1 million. Whereas we at the time were asking our players to pay for the season. So straight away you're kind of thinking, wow, this is a different ball game here. So first and foremost, I suppose, playing against a higher level of player, probably a full-time player and a couple of international players in teams. That was a big challenge and a big lesson as to how we approach these games. Was it, and then I suppose as well, having to do it within a week, was something else. We're used to maybe training a couple of times a week and having our game at the weekend, and that was our season, and the season was only maybe 15, 16 games long over 7-8 months. So all of a sudden it's 3 big games, and the excitement as well of coaching and playing for the players in the Champions League as well. So dealing with a lot of that. What we did do, and again, to give massive credit to the club, is we organised a kind of a week away. We went to Portugal the summer prior to that, and we went away and we worked off a schedule as in we would when we got to Poland. So that was massive. The club deserve a lot of credit for plan, and Will Doyle, to be fair, deserves a lot of credit for planning that and getting us there. Because that stood to us. With the first year, we ended up winning 2 games, and we lost 1 game. Unfortunately, didn't qualify for the round of 32. But as I said, fantastic experience for everybody involved, and as I said, lessons learned. Coming up against players, full-time players, where I hope and I wish to see women's football in Ireland go over the next few years. But obviously, you see some of the players then that step up to the mark end up going to maybe the States or going to England. But then the second year, obviously, I was the manager, and we hosted it in Ireland ourselves, and that was a big learning curve. We lost the first game against the top seeds, and then we were unlucky in the second game. We had a player sent off in the last minute. Unfortunately, a bad decision, and it affected us. It affected me as a manager. We lost the game in the last minute to a penalty, and we just couldn't get a win in the last game against the bottom seeds then, and we drew 0-0. So a difficult campaign that year, especially being at home. But again, the experience of being in the Champions League again was fantastic for everybody. And the club have gone on and done it a couple of times since that and played clubs such as Ajax, and those things are fantastic experiences. But as I said, some of the players have ambitions to go further, and you look at players like Rihanna Jarrett now, who's gone to Brighton, and kicked on. So it's fantastic to see the club do so well and being able to push those players. And Ella Malloy is a new one coming on the scene, who I think will be another player to watch for the Irish national team.
Brilliant. Sounds like an amazing experience. Gary, I just want to move on now and talk about Tramore and your role there. Obviously, your local club, and you're currently head coach there. What have you tried to bring in from environments like Waterford and like Wexford Youths into that club?
Yeah, I suppose it's my club. I've played for the club all my life, as well as I still try and play anyway. But it's a fantastic club. It's a big club. Tramore is a big town. So we've got a lot of teams. We probably range from a lot of recreational teams to some teams we try and push on and compete at a high level as well, and then all the way to our first team, which is doing quite well at the moment. With the new model we've kind of pushed on now, is we want a lot of our younger players to be retained and to play in the squad. So that's what we're doing. Our second team also was populated with a lot of young players because we want to prepare them to play in the first team. So we've taken that route that maybe I'm playing now in the second team myself, and the average age is probably 19 of the team. And I'm probably bringing that up a couple of years, to be fair. But for me, I suppose it's working with the club to do whatever I can to assist them. If I can take a team, if I can take a few sessions for a team and help them, like obviously working with Watford, my time has become less with the club. So it's important for me, and I tell this to any player that we sign in Watford, that never forget where you come from. That's a massive thing for me as a coach, that even though you might make it with Watford and you talk about the coaches that brought you through that academy, you've played under 8, 9, 10, 11, or whatever ages with a local club, and that's played as much a part as their development as anything. So that for me is important. So you never forget your roots, I'll give it back as much as I can to the club. And as I said, at the moment, I'm kind of tailoring some sort of individual player development program there to try and work with players that have ambitions. One that's supposed to kick on and play at a higher level, but also other players have ambitions of just retaining a love for the game, and you're finding the niche in each session. What does the player want? Does he want to just enjoy it? Does he want to become better at shooting? Does he want to become fitter? And if I can give back something to those players to make that club better or to make that person better, I'm always more than happy to do so.
Great. In terms of, you spoke there about how you're trying to develop players within those IDPs. Obviously, a big part of your role is developing the coaches that work for the club, and a vast majority of them are probably volunteers. How do you go about trying to upskill and develop those coaches?
Yeah, as I said, it is a big club, and we have a lot of volunteers that help with clubs and help with teams, and some might be parents and some might be young coaches that are trying to improve. But I suppose we've got a lot of high level coaches in the club as well. We've a pro licensed coach, we've a few A licensed, we've a B licensed coach. So we've got a lot of coaches there that people probably look up to and think that they'd love some help. So as I said, it's never forgetting where you come from, and for us, it's about how can we make these coaches better? How can we make these volunteers better? How can we help them to have better sessions? We were trying to work on a little bit before COVID came in terms of getting the coaches together and having little kind of coach education seminars and things like that. And unfortunately, it kind of has paused a little at the moment. But as I said, we're constantly in dialogue with WhatsApp, and you're talking to coaches and you're giving them some feedback and asking them if there's anything they need, if there's any questions. Never be shy to pick up the phone, and some of them have, and that's great. And if I can have a chat with someone and help them to improve, an under 12 C team, for example, that they're not going to win the league maybe, but they might have all of those players still wanting to play in a year's time. That's a success for that coach, So that stuff is massive to me. A local club retention is as important as being successful for anything.
Brilliant. Going to move on now, Gary, to your role with the Coach's Voice and your ambassador role with the Coach's Voice Academy. How did that role come about, and what does it involve, and what do you get out of it?
It's something relatively new, actually. Probably towards the tail end of last season, I had a conversation with a guy from the Coach's Voice Academy. Just felt that they were looking for people around in different geographic locations to maybe that they felt would be a good fit to promote, I suppose, what they were trying to do. So I had a good chat, to be fair, and I felt, what they offer something good. So I said I've no problem putting my name towards it. So basically, what it is it's content aimed at people coaching young players. I know there's the Coach's Voice as a spin-off, and you've probably seen some of the videos of some of the top coaches talking about maybe some of the memorable games. Some of that stuff is really interesting too, but the big thing for me was the content being specific to us as coaches working with younger players. I suppose that was the big thing. So I was more than happy to help out with that. the content is quite good, and I've been looking. I'm trying to get myself back in. I've took a little bit of a break over Christmas in terms of education for myself, because it's important you never stop learning as a coach. But now I'm kind of trying to push myself back in to look at some of the sessions, to look at some of the conversations, and get myself back on, because at the moment I know we're in lockdown, but if we can improve and over lockdown little bases and be better coaches when we come out the other side. As I said, the coach's voice is something that will hopefully contribute to my development, and if I can share that to help other people become better coaches, it's a win-win for everybody, in my opinion.
Great. Just before we move on to my final quick-fire questions, because we're almost out of time, I just want to ask you around what have you done during lockdown to try and upskill yourself and continuously develop, because although it's been a tough time for so many people, it's also a unique opportunity to maybe take stock and reflect and develop. What have you been up to? What have you done?
Yeah, it has. I suppose with this is our third lockdown now. Was the first one I really got into taking in webinars and learning and jotting down notes and stuff like that. Probably it probably went into overdrive. I think the amount of webinars that became available during that time. Not that they're bad now or anything like that, but I felt I was doing too many, so I felt conscious that I wanted to step out a little. Between the second lockdown, we were back coaching and stuff, and it was all hands on deck, and we were trying to make sure that everything was done right. So now, I'm realigning myself, and I suppose at the end of every season, and the League of Ireland season runs in the calendar year, so our end of season is really kind of coinciding with a new year. So you're talking about, right, what's on the agenda for Gary Hunt for 2021, and I'm trying to now look at, right, what's next. As I said, unfortunately Waterford FC Academy is not going to be there, so what's next for Gary Hunt, so that's something I need to delve into now myself, and I'm in the middle of it at the moment. What's next for me, I suppose, is to speak to my coaches to understand how I can become better, because I think it's important to constantly evaluate yourself and, ask the tricky questions and get the answers you maybe don't want to hear. But if you don't do that, I suppose you stand still and you don't become better. So that's probably next on my agenda. And the lockdown thing for me is to speak with the guys that I've worked with for the last few years that have been so good to me, to maybe now put them on the spot and ask them, right, what did I do that wasn't good? And I suppose they might want to say, but for me to become better, I need them to be as honest as possible with me, and I'm sure they will.
Yeah, great. We're almost out of time, Gary, but I've just got 4 quick fire questions for you to finish. So question 1, what 3 values would you say are at the heart of your coaching philosophy?
I suppose for me, when I'm looking at teams I coach, and what I'm looking for from the players and everybody, I suppose first I'm looking for team players, people who want to be part of the team, people that aren't going to put themselves first, that once they cross the white line or once they come through the door, that they're sacrificing everything for the best of the team. Not that I'm saying that you have to always sometimes you need to think yourself, especially when they're trying to make first team football. We try and make that as competitive as they can for them. A work ethic is important, that people believe in hard work, because a lot what I say to my players, a lot of hard work pays off, and if they don't believe in wanting to put in the hard miles and running back and putting in tackles and making headers, they won't stand out in my teams, and they'll find it hard to get in. So a work ethic, I suppose, being a team player, and honesty, I suppose, being honest in both their performance and in their communication. Don't hide around things. Don't tell me you were doing something when you weren't doing it, or there's never a problem if someone can't make a train, and if someone is struggling with playing in a position, there's no problem with asking a question. The worst thing that can happen is someone says no, or there's no such thing as a bad question, all of those cliches, but they're right. If someone's honest with you, it means a lot.
Great. My second question then is, what one thing do you want to learn or improve on in 2021?
I suppose it's now for me. It's see where I want to go next. So we spoke about my pathway. I've gone from working in grassroots to going to the women's game, to have worked now in an elite academy. So I suppose I'm at a crossroads now. So I want to learn for myself is where's next for myself. Where do I want to go? Do I want to go to first team football? Do I want to stay in the academies football? Do I want to go back to girls football? I don't know. That's what I want to learn about myself now. Is I'm at that crossroads, and where's this journey going to take me next? So that's next for me, I suppose.
Yeah. And my next question then leads nicely off that. Where do you want to be in 5 years' time?
Still in football. Definitely enjoying it. I think that's the main thing. If you're not enjoying it, I think you need to remove yourself from whatever situation you're in. Ideally, I'd love to be coaching full time. Unfortunately, Waterford, as much as I put full time emphasis on it, it's not a full time job. I'd love to be working full time in football. For me, I believe, once you're doing something, you're contributing to it and you're giving back and you're working on something that's successful on and off the pitch. I think that's as important. For me, I'm not going to say I want to be coaching Man City or I want to be over in Everton because that's the team I support, or anything like that in 5 years' time. If I'm working with Waterford first team, or if I'm working back with Wexford Youth Women, and I'm doing a good job and I'm contributing to something that's bigger than the sum of its parts, I'll be happy, because I'm giving back, but I'm also giving people an opportunity to become the best person they can become, be it on the pitch or off the pitch.
Great. And my final question for you, Gary, is what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
I have two. I have two pieces. I suppose one wasn't directly at me. It was I was at a concert a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, Florence and the Machine, and something she said in the concert stood out to me. She was just speaking generally, and the term she used was said keep showing up, and that was all about when people aren't watching, keep coming, keep turning up, keep doing the job, and that was something that just stood with me that night, and I put that into the couple of Waterford teams I've done since, and it's a motto that I've tried to shell onto them, and that they've bought into. And as I said, it worked. And I think a measure of that one day was, I think one of the lads before with the final actually mentioned it in a radio interview. So I kind of, well, they're obviously listening to me, so that was something. But I suppose then probably one of my biggest mentors back in Tramore, Paul Power, which since I started coaching, he's been someone I've been able to ask questions of, and I've had a lot of downs and a lot of ups, and one biggest thing he's always said to me is keep the faith. When you're going. So for me, when you're in bad times, when you're losing matches, or when you're losing players, or people aren't agreeing with you, keep the faith, because if you keep working hard and being honest with it, things will turn around. And as I say to everybody, if you do your best, no one can ask any more of you. And as I said, keep the faith. Good times are coming, but also when it's going good, appreciate those times too, because they're not always going to be there. And as I said, last year I'm involved in a successful academy. This season I'm not. So, as I said, so now it's going to be a challenge for me to find what's next. Where does Gary Hunt want to go? So, keep the faith, I suppose.
Yeah, Gary, that's all we've got time for. Thanks so much for giving up your time to speak to me. It's been really insightful, and I'm sure everyone who's been watching this will take a lot away from it. As always, if you have been watching this and you have got any feedback for me, please do drop me a message. Love to hear it, and it really does mean a lot, and I can pass any feedback on to Gary as well. Gary, all the best for whatever comes next. I'm sure you will find something and fall on your feet fairly soon, and you'll make a success out of it. But no matter what comes next, all the very best for it, and hopefully it won't be long before restrictions will lift, that we can get back out on the grass working with players again. Nearly sick of all these Zoom calls at the minute, but just want to get back out on the grass. But yeah, Gary, thank you very much, and all the best for the future. And to everyone watching, I will see you again next week for episode 5.
Yeah, and appreciate that. Thanks very much, and you're doing some great work. So keep it up as well, Colin. Well done.